How's everyone doing? How'd everyone like the panel? Give it up for the panel. I was really touched by Scott's story at the end. I thought that was amazing that he opens that up and wears that so candidly, and I agree with the advice. As far as the session tonight, the back end of that emotional story that I told at the beginning is basically I realized that personalized messaging was the way to go and that there was some kind of responsibility there. So I went to my leadership at the time and I said, okay, I have two things that I want. And they're like, great, here's Becc again in my office. I said, I want complete autonomy. I don't want you to ask me any questions. Not one fucking Slack message. Oh shoot, my parents are here. Never mind. I mean, my parents aren't here, I can't admit that. If you see two people who are over the age of 60 who look like me combined, that is not my parents. I said, not one message, not one question. And the second thing I want is if I can't 2x your numbers in a month, I want you to fire me. Because a leader without good instincts isn't much of a leader, in my opinion. And so they said, okay, kid, here's the keys. And I'm like, I didn't know that would actually work, that heart tear-jerking speech. So I went, I'll never forget, on February 28th, we went live, and I was sweating the night before because I knew that I was going to pull down the volume of our outreach. March 1st, we went live. March 5th, we had 2x our numbers. March 10th, we had 3x our numbers. March 15th, we had 4x our numbers. And we had 4x with the same amount of people and same exact people, which is what was interesting to me. So we held at 4x for the entire breadth of my tenure at that company. So at that point, I had two questions that I decided that I needed to answer. One of the things that I had done is I took them from 100 cold calls and 50 emails per day, all the way back to 10 emails and 20 cold calls per day. And so the two things that I knew that the questions that I had to answer for the industry to claim that I had scaled it was, number one, people are going to say, what about the consistency and maintaining consistency among my reps? SDRs are usually very new. They're right out of college. They don't know my ICP. They don't know my business, et cetera. So how do I maintain consistency? And then the second question that I knew everyone would ask is, I want you guys to guess. How do you scale it? And what do you mean by scale? Yeah, volume of outreach. So I basically went to Trish Bertuzzi. She's a CEO of Bridge Group. She cuts out a lot of different reports. And I said, what is your average activity metric? And she said, 52 cold calls per day. Read my reports. You don't have to call me. And so I knew that I needed to find a way at the next company. She probably said something nicer than that. Probably being a little hard on her. I knew at my next company, I was very interested to find out, did this just work for my company, or was this going to work for other organizations? So I went on to a second company, and I knew that I had to scale from 20 cold calls to 52 cold calls. Otherwise, the industry would call BS. They would say that I hadn't scaled it. So I leveraged it into sales engagement, called a couple of different vendors and said, I have an idea. Same response, here's ideas, lady. And I'm like, I have an idea, and I need y'all's help. I need you to kick me a customer success team, and I need to find a way to work this into a sales engagement platform. So I went to this second company, 3x my numbers, and then I came on to Chorus, and within a month, we had 6x our numbers. So tonight, I wanted to walk through structurally what we did in that time. The 4 different pieces of the agenda that I wanted to cover tonight. Number 1 is I'm going to walk back and forth so that you guys can see. And number 1 is going to be how to pick a personalized premise. How do you structure even teasing out a premise that is personalized? Number 2, I'm going to go on to the structure of an email. Number 3, how do we work that into a cold call? Where do you personalize there to bump conversion? And then we're going to finish off with how the shell do you scale this? I thought that was the funniest joke I've made in my lifetime. But using shell sequences. So without further ado, let's jump into the content. Picking a premise. I basically got out a big sheet of paper and I started writing down all the things that you could personalize on. So I want you guys to shout out a couple of things that you could personalize on, you think. New jobs. Universities, good one. Sports teams, good one. Anything else? Bingo. So I basically made this entire spreadsheet and said, like, okay, these are all the things you hypothetically could personalize on. And when I mean personalize, I mean a little bit different of the definition of what the industry normally means. When the industry normally says they're personalizing, they either mean they are personalizing based on a demographic principle. For example, that's like B2C predilection, age, gender. Tonight we'll use role. Are they in accounting? Are they in finance? Are they in HR? They mean number 2, technographic personalization. What kind of tech stack are they using? For instance, over here at Chorus, we integrate with a certain number of CRMs, web conferencing system, and dialers. But how can I segment my users according to the tech stack? Or number 3, they mean firmographic personalization. So what kind of segment, industry vertical, company size. By the way, I see you waving. 10 minutes and the AC will be kicked on. Yay. Thumbs up. They mean firmographic personalization. So what kind of company size, industry vertical, product sophistication, round of funding are they in? And that's where most companies stop. They'll call all of that personalization. But I knew there was this 4th bucket of psychographic personalization. So psychographic is going to be anything that someone believes, they have an interest in, or an attitude about. So when you hear someone that really believes something or something that they really want to talk about on LinkedIn, you're usually coming across a psychographic principle. So for instance, I see a lot of different posts from recruiters, and they'll say like, hey, you don't need to have this prototypical, employment to be successful. You can have a gap in your employment history. And so they're usually getting really fired up on LinkedIn because they have this belief behind something. So tonight we're going to go into all the psychographic principles that you can personalize on and how can you hook that in your messaging. We're going to start with the highest trigger rate and go down to the least response rate. So let's start with number 1. Number 1 is going to be anything self-authored by your prospect. So it's going to be an article, it's going to be a webinar, or any kind of posts on LinkedIn. Anyone want to take a guess as to why that is the highest response rate in my experience? I heard it. Say it louder.
People love to hear about themselves.
They do. People love to hear about themselves. There is a physical reaction in your body when someone is talking about your work. She's laughing. When someone's talking about your work or getting you to talk about them or about themselves, there's physical dopamine being released in their brain, making them like you. So the number 1 bucket is going to be anything self-authored by them, anything they wrote, webinar, article, post, and if you can tease out a line, we'll go into a couple of the rules of engagement later, but the asterisk mark here is whatever you pick out about the person, you're going to need to carry out throughout the message. We can't do what's called the 10-80-10 rule. Anyone heard of the 10-80-10 rule? You're shaking your head. I'm going to pick on you. What's the 10-80-10 rule? Bingo. So I'll give you an example. I get a lot of messages. I'm in rough territory here, and you'll figure out in 2 seconds why. Get a lot of messages that say, hi, Becc. I noticed you went to Texas A&M University. There we go. Got a couple. All right, I'm still safe. Notice you went to Texas A&M University. We over here at Chorus help sales reps get better. Give me a shot Wednesday at 4 to unpack how we do that. What's the problem with that message? I didn't hook it. Are you Nikki? I am. It's Nikki. That's great. You need to hook it. Hook it to whatever your value prop is. Otherwise, the first thing that you pick out, they're going to see it as a little bit disingenuous, of like you were just picking out this personalized premise to get a response. I once got a message from a sales engagement vendor. I won't mention who they are, but it said, hi, Becc, personalized line. Rest of the email, and I was like, oh my gosh. In my younger days, I would have screenshot it, thrown it on LinkedIn, and asked them if they needed help using their own product. But I was like, I'm going to take a step in maturity. I'm going to just grow up here and just delete the message. But that's what it feels like to your prospect. The problem with our prospects and the benefit we have with our prospects is they're very, very smart. So you guys can tell the difference between personalization and unpersonalized messaging, and so can they. The second bucket is going to be engaged content. This is anything that they shared, liked, or commented on LinkedIn. Most of this that I'm sourcing is off of LinkedIn. But it's going to be anything that they basically engage with where they didn't author it. It's going to have a little less response rate because they're not the hero in the situation. Whoever made the post did is in the situation, but it's still going to be your second highest bucket for personalization in terms of response. Third bucket is going to be self-identified traits. Company line, profile line, headline. Probably my favorite bucket. The reason being, it is someone talking in third person about how awesome they are. Becc is a badass executor, #1 in building hypergrowth teams. And so how you can position this back to your prospects is when you repeat back the language that they wrote, if you're not correct, what did they do on their LinkedIn profile? They lied, and they don't want to be a liar. So you can say, really loved your profile line where you talk about scaling effective teams, especially when you talked about having great conversations. What if you can ensure that all your reps over at Okta were having great conversations like you mentioned in your profile and crush quota attainment as a result? So you're really pivoting and mirroring back their language onto your prospect. The fourth bucket is going to be affectionately junk drawer. I'm not calling you junk, by the way. Don't want to lose fans early on. But schools attended, personal interests, hobbies, anything that is non-work related about them that you can tie back to your product. So when it comes to a sales ICP, you probably have a number of different ICPs in here, some technical, some financial, some within sales. I will say for selling into a sales ICP, about half of the leaders love these premises. About half of the leaders really don't like these premises. So I'd be a little bit careful here, always with the asterisk mark of whatever you tease out, you have to hook back to your product. So if I'm, picking out, hey, Josh, I noticed that you love wine, I have to go the direct, he does, I'm just kidding. He drinks all the time on the bus, you guys, save me. If I pick out, hi, Josh, I noticed you love wine, an angle
Becc,
like
I don't drink on the bus, for clarity.
I thought that was coming. So if it was, hi, Josh, I noticed that you liked wine, when it comes down to wine, it's all about highlighting the best flavors. What if you could highlight the best flavors of your sales conversations, and crush more quota attainment as a result? So whatever you put here, you need to make sure that you hook back to your value prop. The fifth bucket in the least responded to bucket is going to be firmographic. Firmographic is anything about the company, M&A, blogs, hiring, website language. My only advice here would be the more detailed, but the more brief that you could be, the better. There are a lot of messages that we have sent out as templates that look personalized, but aren't truly personalized. Can anyone give me an example of one of those? You're about to say something. Anyone? Bingo. I noticed you're growing. I've been following your company for a while. My CEO sent me your way. My boss wants an update on this account. I'm like, does he? Does he really want an update on this account? So when it comes to talking about company, you need to hook saying, I noticed you were growing, and I noticed that you grew 63%, just added 17 reps and a new VP of sales. One message communicates to my buyer that I don't know them. One communicates that I've actually done my homework. So I think the CMO of Lyft on LinkedIn said it the best one day. If you want 15 minutes of my time, give me 5 of yours first by knowing who I am. So you need to trigger to your prospect, what about them made you want to reach out. When it comes to pairing these, you can pair them in 2 different ways. We'll go into a little bit of this structure later. If you don't, let's dig into postbound a little bit first. Postbound, how many inbound reps do we have here in the audience? Okay, I'm going to pick on you guys in the back. What do you call inbound? One in the middle, you. Yeah, direct sales, so someone reaching out to you. How many in here have had a marketing team tell them that a content download, webinar registrant, or event attendee is an inbound? How many of you think that they don't have, or how many of you don't think that they have as much buyer readiness as a hand raiser? Same amount of group. So any kind of marketer would say this is an inbound. To me, an inbound is a demo request or a chat box interface. Outbound is going to be someone who doesn't know you at all. And I just coined a term, postbound is anything in the middle. So we got content downloads, webinar registrants, event attendees, firmographic triggers, IPO, website views. You can go a lot of different angles, common VCs, but anyone who knows your company but hasn't actually raised their hand yet. When it comes to mentioning a postbound premise, I usually mention it for context, transition with the words, but more importantly, and focus on the actual buyer with the psychographic principle. Reason being, how many of you in here tonight, if we sent you a follow-up email that said, "Hi, blank, I noticed that you attended Flip the Script. Awesome. Would you like a demo of Chorus?" How many of you would respond to that? 0 in the room. Shit ain't working. Sorry, Mom. Crap ain't working. It ain't working anymore. So I would mention it for context, transition with, but more importantly, I don't want to talk about me. I don't want to talk about Chorus. I don't want to talk about our event. I want to talk about you. So I use the words, but more importantly, and focus on them with a summary. If I don't have a postbound premise, then I typically do a summary and then one line in specific. I get a lot of outreach of people saying, I've had one on the phone the other day. They said, like, "Hey, I really love your Flip the Script content." I said, "Oh, that's great to hear. What did you like?" Click, 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 click. I'm like, "No way. You didn't watch it, did you?" I'm like, ego's hurt a little bit, so we want to make sure that our prospects, know that we truly, we're digging into whatever content. So I'd have one line in specific. It will also give you a little bit more meat to dig into in your value prop. So now we know how to pick out a premise, but how do we work it into email? For email, I would defer to Chuck Jones. Anyone know who Chuck Jones is? Who is he? Looney Tunes, very, very good. He is the author of all of the rules of animation. So Chuck Jones, true story, his father was known as being a notoriously terrible businessman. And when he was little, Chuck Jones's dad would basically start at a company, get super motivated, and put the name of the company on letterhead and pencils, and then every time he got canned, he'd give it to Chuck Jones and just say, "Use it up. Use it up any way that you can." He is known for drawing upwards of 200,000 drawings in his career. And after 100,000, he started thinking about the rules of animation. How does this actual thing work over the actual technique itself? So an instance is, if you're going to turn an animal into a character, this is a rule. If you're going to give them a head, this is how big the head should be. And when it came to Wile E. Coyote, he knew that he wasn't the genesis of all creative thought, just like I do. But he still wanted to keep his writers in a certain amount of rules to keep him within the structure of his vision. So he created 9 rules that every Looney Tunes or every Wile E. Coyote episode should encompass. A couple of examples. One is that gravity is Wile E. Coyote's biggest enemy. And so when you think about Wile E. Coyote, what do you first think about? Him running off, and then gravity's his biggest enemy. So I wanted to work the same kind of structure into emails of, if I hired the right person, I hired a really smart, creative, driven person, and I still want to have a little bit of, direction and structure of the email, but I also wanted to harness that horsepower so that they could come up with all these wonderful premises. I get asked a lot if AI could replace sales development. I'm like, how you're running it? Yes. If it's a template, marketing can send it out using HubSpot, then yeah, the answer is yeah. But what we hire these sales development reps for is their wonderful intel. Humanity, they know these accounts, they know these people, and they can come up with these really interesting hooks and flavors that can make us want to be engaged with their company. So the rules of the outline of an email that I put together go like this. I actually relied very, very heavily, full disclosure, on MJ Hoffman, the author of Why You Now. Absolutely incredible stuff. He put together what's called the F-shaped email. And so the structure goes like this. The first line, 3 lines, 4 lines, max for an email. Not paragraphs, lines. Because the one asset, if you're talking to a decision maker, that they don't have enough of is time. So you want to get to the point, get there quickly. The first line I usually do is the premise. Google did a study on how we all read emails. Creepy, but true. And the insights that they developed was that you start at 2 o'clock on an email, and then your eyes go clockwise. So what that tells you about how your prospects are going to read your emails is they're going to start at the end of the first line, then rotate down to the end of the last line, then rotate down to the beginning of the last line, and then rotate to the middle. So the first line is usually comprised of what? Hi, my name is, who we are. The last line is comprised of call to action, what you want. And then the middle line is usually comprised of value prop. So the least valuable real estate that will not even be seen is your middle line and what your company does. It's the least valuable differentiator to you as a rep. So what that means is in this first line, instead of talking about you, hello, my name is Becc and I work for AT&T and we blah, 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 I switch it. Let's talk all about them. That's where I'm going to hook them and talk all about the reason, the thing they did, the article they wrote, the webinar that they were a part of that made me want to engage with them, think that they might find value in my product. So I want to hit this dopamine hit up front of talking about them so they loop around to my CTA and see what I want where I request one time and then coax them into the middle so it's all one cohesive email. The middle line is usually going to be the medium-sized length. Top line is the longest. Middle line is medium-sized length. And I will say I went too far on the slide and I don't know how to go back on this creepy clicker. It's like pretty advanced. Anywho, the middle line, you want to make sure that you hook your premise into your value prop. A good tip that I have there is if you can't highlight 3 words in the first line and those same 3 words in the second line, then you haven't hooked it hard enough, is usually a rule that we use, kind of a quick tip. The last line is going to be the CTA, where I typically ask for one time to unpack whatever the agenda is above, but I keep it short. So our prospects aren't not responding to us because they're mean. They're not responding to us because they just want to be rude to a bunch of reps, random people. They're not responding to us because we weren't relevant. So they're not wondering whether Thursday at 2 or 3 or 4 or Friday at 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 works for them. They're wondering whether you're worth it. So I see a lot of these times of like, do you want Thursday at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9? And I'm like, oh my God, I don't even know who you are. Like, chill. First I want to know whether I want to spend time with you at all. Then we can talk about calendaring. So I usually pick one time to unpack the agenda. So that's great and all. Now we know the structure of an email. But how do I maintain consistency within the actual text? What do I actually say within that email to hook people? So what I put together in true Chuck Jones form is 7 pillars of flavors that we stick by and we hold by at Chorus, and then 7 deadly sins of basically just a long list of stuff to never say. So I'm almost less interested in what these pillars are for you. I think the worst thing that I could do is come up here and teach you a structure and tell you to deploy it verbatim without any creativity. You're all selling into different segments, to different verticals, with different use cases. Some are channel sales, some are SDRs, some are AEs, some are full cycle. So I want you to take the structure that you see tonight and deploy what that means for you and make it work for you. The 7 pillars that I picked are, I'll start at the top of the number 1 pillar that I see done the least well, and then I will pivot down to the pillars that I see done very, very often within the industry. The first one's going to be prospect-centric, pretty simple. Every word out of your mouth should be about your prospect. Really easy to do in theory, really hard to do in practice. A great example of that, when it comes to social proof, I constantly see people with these like trophy wife social proof. We work with LinkedIn. It's always LinkedIn, Spotify, and like Pinterest. Those are always the 3. Yelp's always in there for every company. Everyone works with Yelp somehow. So instead of mentioning your social proof and you're awesome and your customers are awesome and the reason they're awesome because they work with you, I would focus all on the prospect. So if I'm going to even mention social proof, I want to make it relevant to them. So instead of saying we work with LinkedIn, I would say we work with companies like you in terms of size, for example, LinkedIn, of even giving a reason to them of why you are picking that piece of social proof. The tricky thing with social proof is if you pick someone too big, they're like, we're too small, and we don't fit in that. If you pick someone too small, they're thinking, we're too big, can you scale that? Or you'll never know when you hit some weird emotional pocket with someone and you just had no idea. For example, I am from Dallas. I love which basketball team? Of course. I live in San Francisco. Ask my parents, they think I'm a traitor. Someone after the NBA Finals reaches out and says, hey, Warriors are awesome, crushed it again. What if you could replicate, whatever, Steph Curry and on and on and on, homeboy goes. How awesome the Warriors are, Warriors are, Warriors are, Warriors are. I'm like, dude, I hate the Warriors. I hate them. I'm like, every time I hear Steph Curry, I'm like, because they're beating my team. So when it comes to social proof, you never know when you will run into some secret emotional pocket. So I would say if you're going to use social proof, at least make it relevant to them in terms of why you mention them. Go ahead. No, I didn't. I should have. The second pillar is pain-centric. I was in the hospital for a couple of months. I was recovering because I had first, second, and third degree burns from the waist down. I chihuahua. At that point in the hospital, whenever I was going into surgery and they were thinking about skin grafts and all of this, if someone had come up to me and said, I'll give you one of two things. I'll either give you a free trip to Tahiti after you're finished, or I'll give you a tiny pink pill that will take all that pain away. Which one do you think I would have taken? Why do you think I would have taken that one? Yeah. So the best feeling in the world is relief. Relief from something. Relief from a worry that you lost your cell phone. Your relief from some pain in your day-to-day. Someone calls and you think someone's in an accident. You get to the hospital and they're just fine. Best feeling in the world. So when you're talking to your prospects, I would talk about if they're in the business world, they have pains. I'd find out what those pains are in general, and I'd find out a way to speak to them instead of in a way of features and dump, talking all about the value prop. Josh Brown will go on a little bit later, and he'll talk about swords versus superpowers, how you can incorporate your product into a superpower of how you can help them relieve some kind of pain. The third pillar is going to be pride aversion. Probably my favorite pillar. Why don't we role play this? I'm going to pick on you if it's okay. What's your name? Lexi. Nice to meet you. So I want to role play where we meet each other, and I want you to ask me or say, tell me about yourself. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, my name's Becc. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Tell me about yourself.
I'm awesome. I'm crushing it in my job. CEO loves me. My nieces and nephews adore me. I wake up and crush it at the gym for 5 miles. My dating life, I'm just turning guys down all day, every day. Flowers just show up. It's like a rom-com. They just love me. Okay, time out. Lexi, do you like me at this point?
Not really.
Not so much. Why don't you like me?
Because you never asked about myself.
Bingo.
Maybe you just talked about yourself.
So oftentimes, I used to do a little bit of content in the past, and I would go on in the beginning, and I would have this big badass slide talking all about how awesome I was, my career trajectory, all these wonderful things I had done, roles, titles, the works. And then I realized one day, no one gives a shit. No one cares about my background and what I did for other people and how awesome I'm going to talk about myself. They care about what I've done for them. So when it comes to talking about pride aversion, all of your prospects don't like ego because all of your prospects deep down have ego. So if you're going to make light, if you're going to talk well about anyone, if you're going to fan out about anyone, Fan out about your prospect. Tell them this thing that they did, within reason. Don't overdo it. And don't be, fangirl. But tell them this thing that they did, this line that they said, this article that they wrote, that impacted you. I walked into a dinner once. I'll never forget this. I walk in. There's this guy, and I walk straight up to him, and he's like, hey, he's VP of Sales at Pandora. Love Pandora. And he says, hey, I think we're connected on LinkedIn. I'm like, I think I've been following you for 3 years. Let me tell you the top 5 things that you wrote that impacted me. Bang, bang. And he's like, oh, God. I'm like, bang, 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 bang. I'm like, now let me give you. He's like, and we're still going. I'm like, now let me give you the top 5 reasons why I think Pandora is way more amazing than Spotify. Girlfriend goes on and on and on and on and on. I'm listing these reasons. He bought our product because he's like, oh my God, this girl has done the most amount of research. He at least gave us a shot. And then low-key, 3 weeks later, he updated to change his job to Spotify. I reached out to him like, I'm so sorry, that was my evil twin. She goes on mad rants. But point being, if you're going to fan out about someone, if you're going to love someone, if you're going to talk about someone for days and days, heaven forbid it be us. Let it be them. I need to stay on time here, so I'll go through these pretty briefly. The last 4 pillars, fluidity, really, really easy to do in our heads, really, really hard to do in practice. All predicated on teasing out or connecting the premise to the value prop to the CTA. This is something I still struggle with, of like actually making a cohesive email. One kind of quick tip that I have is I tend to multi-value prop in an email. We do this, 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 and this. I would pick one, drill it home. Next email, pick one, drill it home. We all do multiple things for multiple different buyer personas. So usually that helps with length, and it helps with talking cohesively. I would speak to my prospects not in a demeaning way, but in a way that a 7-year-old can understand. I remember walking around SaaStr with a CEO once. We're walking around for 20 minutes, and he goes, can I just stop you for a second? And I'm like, what's up? He said, we've been walking around for 20 minutes, and I don't know what a single one of these fucking company does. I've been reading all of their marketing material, and I have no idea what they do. So when it comes to being fluid, I would pick one, drill it home, so that you can make sure that they at least understand that one and then go to another value prop in the next email. 5th, relevance. Get a lot of emails to me talking about how they can help me win more business and closed-won deals. I'm a head of sales development. What do I care about? I heard you. What, can you say it louder? Meetings. That's what I care about. I'm like, of course I care about closed-won revenue. Of course I care about pipeline. Of course I care about how great these conversations are going on in the back end. But my success, my marker as a leader, is measured on how many meetings and the quality of those meetings that come along the way. So if you're going to talk to me about something, talk to me about how you can help me drive more meetings, because that's the number one concern that's going to be in my head. So I'd make sure you know who your buyer is. I see a lot of reps in the beginning, they'll say like, hey, the number one thing I want is more of my own product knowledge. I'm like, put that aside. You'll get to know that. Know more about your buyer. Know about their role, whatever ICP they're in, everything that they do, their day-to-day. And the great thing about our buying community today is people love to be mentors. So I'm going to pick on you for a second in the green sweater. What's your name? Yes. Adrian. Adrian, do you like asking for directions? Why not? Because I got maps. Do you like giving directions?
Sure.
Why do you like giving directions? Like helping. We all like to help one another. So it feels really good to us when we're the hero in the narrative. So I'd ask my prospects, if you don't know what's relevant to your buyer, I would go to them, make a post on LinkedIn. I remember at one point I made a post on LinkedIn that said, I don't know CIOs. Anyone is a CIO who can help me. CIO of Dell comes in on the thread and says, I'll give you an hour and a half. I'm like, okay. I'm like, what do you care about? On and on and on he goes. I'll never forget it. It was the most bizarre thing I've ever seen because he just wanted to help. So I'd figure out what is relevant to my buyer and how can I speak to that. Number 6, brevity. I'll be brief, wink. Never use 7 words when 4 words will do. Number 7, noticeability. Noticeability all comes down to your subject line. The most viral email campaign of all time, the subject line was pictures of your wife cheating on you. Went to my friend who's a man, who is married to a man. And he's like, well, this isn't for me. Opens the email, and it is a campaign for weight loss. If you don't lose weight, your wife will cheat on you. What do you think the response was to that campaign? Deplorable. Deplorable. So if we are trying to build trust with our buyers, we're trying to build rapport, we're trying to earn that spot where we're a trusted advisor, the worst thing we can do is start off on a foot where we're saying free puppies and then talking about sales enablement software in the middle of the message. So I would just say a quick tip here is, yes, the goal is to get an email open, but always make sure that it hooks to your body. So now we've talked about all the wonderful things to do. Let's get into the deadly sins, what not to do. Leading off with number 1, being too casual or too silly. Can we just stop sending gifts as an industry? Can we agree to stop doing that? Can I get an amen? Let's just stop sending gifts to people that we don't know. I'm going to pick on you for a second, Jason. If you were to meet former President Barack Obama, would you be on time?
Yes.
Why would you be on time?
I'd be on time for any meeting, but he's the president.
Good for you. That's what Scott mentioned, being on time. That's like my biggest weakness, by the way. My parents were laughing. She's like, guess she's not a unicorn. Purple unicorn. So you said you'd be on time. Why?
Because it allows you to be prepared for the meeting, right? You get there ahead of time, think about what's going to happen, I want to benefit from the meeting. That would benefit.
Bingo. So it's a sign of respect. You respect your prospect. So we want to break down out of the buyer-seller dance. We want to make sure that we can get a candid story. And often we confuse that with being silly right off of the bat. So sending gifts, you can even do something so slight as saying hey to your prospect as opposed to hi. It's really, really slight, and none of these, full disclosure, are going to make someone not take a meeting with you. But the more that they add up, then it decreases your chances as you go. The last one is the list. How many of you have seen these? You must have been swallowed by a crocodile or out on some island somewhere drinking pina coladas or not value data. I'm like, I want to find the dude that came up with that email and have a little chit chat. I don't know where that came from, but I see it quite, pretty frequently. So I would just always make sure that when you're talking to your buyer for the first time, you're speaking to someone, if you're speaking to the right person usually, who has been in their career for 10, 15, 20 years, they should have our respect because they earned it. I would argue that you should respect anyone. Intern, janitor, person in the elevator with you. Always lead with respect because then it warrants this relationship of respect back. Number 2, wasted texts. I know you're busy, but just wanted to follow up, just wanted to circle back. I'd love to. I'm going to pick on my mom. I'm sorry, Mom. She knows I pick on her about this. She used to call me and say, hey, I know you're busy, but. I'm like, Mom, you either don't know I'm busy or you don't care. And she's like, yeah, that one, the second one. I'm like, right. So if you can scratch whatever text it is from your email and you don't lose any actual value to your email, I'd suggest doing it. Happy Monday. Happy Tuesday. I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, just get to the point. I hope that you watch the Super Bowl. I'm like, I don't know who's in this. Look at me. I don't know who's in the Super Bowl. Why are we talking about the Super Bowl? So if you can pull any of that language out, that is your most valuable real estate of what you're talking about. So I'd get to them and get to them quickly. Number 3, being the authority over the prospect. If I put a button up here and I said, do not push this button, what would you innately want to do? You want to push the button. So you have 3 ego states in your body. You have child, parent, and adult. Within your child ego state, you have 2 ego states. You have natural, which is think loves bubbles, impressed by very little, going on a roller coaster. And then you have adaptive, which is bad girl ripping cigarettes underneath, ripping cigs under the bleachers. It's a rebellious part of your nature. So think of the impulse buy. So anytime you command someone to do something, they innately, within their ego state, want to go the other direction. If I say I'm awesome, what do you guys want to do to me? Tear me down. If I trip on stage, what do you want to do to me? You help me up. They're going to rebel against whatever you tell them, so have them rebel in the right direction. Number 4, questioning the prospect's authority. Asking them if they're the decision maker. If they are, they'll probably think, yeah, so what? If they're not, they'll feel invalidated. Either way, it's not going to get you, in my experience at least, the information that you're after. So I'd always look to empower people, enable people, get people to be on your side, and this is a quick way to eradicate that. Number 5, making the prospect feel not okay. If I were to sit up here and I were to say, sorry, Josh, I'm going to pick on you. If I were to say Josh Braun sucks, he's terrible, and these are all the awful things about him. Not true, by the way. Who would that look poorly upon? Me or Josh? Me. What Sarah says about Sally says more about Sarah than Sally. So when it comes to our competitors, all of us have them. All of us hate them. Only talk well. Otherwise, you eradicate that rapport. A good kind of tip there, I've heard in 2020 that the definition of gossip, you either give them the name or you give them the full story. If you give them both, you're a gossip. So I would be very, very careful about talking about anyone who does anything poorly, especially if you're talking to the prospect who's the decision maker. You're usually talking to someone who made the decision that you're now talking poorly about. So very, very careful in competitive emails. Number 6, making your prospect feel stupid. Does that make any sense? I'm like, yeah, it does. Do you know what we do? A quick tip here is, am I making any sense? It puts the onus on your prospects, your ability to communicate versus your prospect's ability to understand. But we always, again, want to make our prospect feel smart, empowered, and able, validated, heard, understood, because people are going to remember the way you make them feel. Number 7, glorifying yourself. I think that we covered this pretty heavily, so I'll be light here. I hear everyone says we're number 1 in the market. I've never heard a platform say, we are the number 2 conversation intelligence platform. Everyone's number 1. So instead of glorifying yourself, I would always, again, talk great about your customer if you're going to talk greatly about anyone. Let's now go into cold call, and then I want to get into structure and close up. Cold call, I'll be pretty quick here. I'd go, this is Becc calling on a recorded line with Chorus. How have you been? If you get the sheet in front of you, there's going to be an extended structure. Today, we're just going to include where you can personalize. Hey, this is Becc calling on a recorded line with Chorus. How have you been? They're like, who? Calling on a recorded line with, huh? And I'm like, that's a great question, no matter what they say. That's a great question. I just took the time to know who you are. You're on my time now. I want to tell you all the wonderful things that you've done. So I say, that's a great question. They'll say, do you compete with great? Blah, that's a great question. The reason for my outreach is I saw you wrote this article where you talked about scaling effective teams. One line that stood out to me was, don't sell braces, sell the smile on their face. Don't sell them a bike, sell them the wind in their hair. Couldn't get enough. So I was curious to know if you've come across Chorus before. At that point, they'll say one of 2 things. What are those answers? Yes or no. They say yes. They've heard of you, and they haven't bought you. There's usually a reason. Anyone know what that reason's called? An objection. Quick tip here, Josh Braun, one of the most amazing objection diffusing kings. I would watch his webinars. I would watch his stuff. We're not going to get into it tonight, but absolutely brilliant. So I'd look into his stuff on how to handle that conversation. Tonight, let's go with the answer of no. They say no. then I want to go into what's called a good old-fashioned upfront contract by Sandler. There are 4 pieces to an upfront contract. There is time, agenda, outcome, and consent. Josh, actually, I want to welcome you to the stage. Well, everyone give it up for Josh Braun. He's terrified right now. Hey, Josh.
Hey, Becc. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Doing well, thank you.
I'm going to ask you 3 questions, and I need you to say yes to all 3 of them.
Okay. So kind of like in my marriage. So
Yeah, exact same thing. Hey, Josh, can I give you a high five?
Yes.
Dope. Hey, Josh, can I give you a hug?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry about our fight earlier. Sorry about the wine comments, too. Hey, Josh, can I hit you?
I do have a safe word, but as long as it's full.
Can you be mad at me right now?
No.
Why can't you be mad at me?
'Cause I gave you permission to hit me and abuse me.
Give it up for Josh Braun. If your prospects give you permission to do something, they can't be mad at you whenever you do it. I hear a lot of people in the beginning of the call, they want to talk about their products, so they speed up their tone. Hi, this is Becc. I'm calling with Chorus, and we do blah, 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 slam. Hang up the phone. If I ask them for the ability to pitch, then they can't. If they say yes, then they can't be mad at it. I want to call out Rob. Rob, you're an SDR at Chorus. You do a lot of upfront contracts. What is your approximate conversion rate at this part of the funnel? 90%. And if I had to guess why, again, I didn't come up with this, no genius here. It's because they will give you the shot. People are waiting to give you a shot. I always think of the movie Step Up, when it's like, there are too much streets, not enough ballet. They're dating Channing Tatum. They get to this dance in the end, and there's like unrealistic amount of college scouts in the audience. And they have this dance that they've prepared. They spent all of this time preparing, gone through all of this emotional, whatever to get there. And so who you're talking to, they didn't start out as a VP. They usually started out where? As a sales rep, knives, nickels, whatever, flowers, phone books, something. And you want to remind them of that delicately, that portion of their career. And so they want to give you a shot. So ours, full disclosure, this can go a lot of different ways. You can do it 1,000 different angles. How we do it at choruses like this. How about this? They say, no, I haven't heard of Chorus. I say, got it. How about this? You give me the next 30 seconds to give you my best dog and pony show on who Chorus is and why I thought we might be a good fit for your team at Okta. And at the end of that 30 seconds, you can tell me whether it makes sense to continue the conversation from there. Is that fair? They're like, you're on, kid. So you want to get their permission. I've got about 6 minutes left, so why don't we go into how you can scale this personalization? The first thing I ask when people ask about scaling is, what do you want to scale? I have a feeling that we wanted to scale results. And somewhere in there, we got lost and started scaling volume. I hear a lot about volume, 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 smile and dial, gas, 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 gas. Gas is important, but smart gas is the most important. So I'm going to go into how you can get this up to 25 emails and 52 cold calls that led up to our 6X. I use outreach. You can use SalesLoft, Yesware, Apollo, Groove, InsideSales.com. You can. You just don't want to. He came from outreach. So full disclosure, you can, but tonight I use outreach for this example. If you go to outreach and you hit the settings tab, you can go into custom tags and you can build all of these fields in. It will take you about 5 minutes to do it, and it'll put it at the prospect level. How many in here have had to called a prospect and the prospect didn't pick up the first time? Right, never. I don't know what she's doing. Actually, she should probably come up here if that's her results. But I wanted to make sure the reps were only doing research once. So I put all of this structure into outreach. And then every single time that I call Scott Barker, is who I use for the example, these premises are going to pop up. So I used something he did on LinkedIn the other day where I put in self-authored content. If he wrote a post on seeing is believing, I hope that's okay, Scott, that I used him. And then the clip that I put, but the key is that I had to see it first. I hit save. I spend 5 minutes on the front end hunting out 3 different personalized premises. It takes me 5 minutes per contact, and it will fuel the entire rest of the sequence. So when Scott picks up, instead of having to do the shuffle of like, oh God, he picked up, like, where's my sheet? Oh my God, I promise I have a personalized premise. I promise. Just hold on 1 second. I wanted it to be smooth and believable. So, hey, this is Becc calling on our quarter-line course. How have you been? I've been great. I'm like, great, glad to hear that. Reason for my outreach is I saw this post that you had the other day on seeing is believing. Love the line where you said, but the key is that I had to see it first. So I was curious to know if you've come across course before. One of the reps on the course team came up to me the other day and he said, hey, I need to talk to you. I'm like, okay, walk and talk. He said, someone hung up on me. I'm like, and he was like, and it's like, oh, Chris, they're going to do so much worse to you than that in your career. He's like, it's just never happened. I'm like, that's because you've been doing, never mind. I'm so sorry for your loss. Call him back, see what happens. If I had to guess why he's not getting hung up on, is because he's hitting that dopamine right in the beginning for every call. You wrote this article, you made this post, you made that, website language, whatever. You went to the school, you did something, and so the people will give you a chance to pitch because they're convinced that you know them. We don't have too much time to go into it. These are all the different scenarios that I built into sales engagement. I put some that you would mention the premise, the transition with, but more importantly, go to your outbound reason on the left-hand side. Content downloads, webinar registrants, executive churn is a great one. User Gems is a platform that can do that for you at scale, pretty nuts. Common VCs demoed in the past. And then I put a long list of premises that I would use to trigger buyer readiness, but I would not mention. Great example is company funding. Anyone want to take a guess as to why I wouldn't mention company funding as the premise of my email? Yeah, commission breath. When you mention company funding as the only premise, it's like saying, hey, I noticed you have money. Do you want to buy my shit? I sell shit for money. So I triggered it. They're probably in market. They just got some funding, but be cool. Don't talk about, religion, politics, money at the table, the dinner table with your prospects. As far as the actual shell of the sequence that I'm building, I follow MJ Hoffman for this one too. He did extensive research on when you should call, how that should go about, et cetera. And basically, in the beginning, if you're hammering your prospects with emails and then you're dissipating near the end, you're teaching your prospect that if they just wait long enough, you'll do what? Go away. So flip it. Be cool on the front end, research them, come up with 3 premises, 4 premises, put them in your engagement vendor, cold email, cold call. That's day 1, 1, 2. Then go to 8, 9, and then I get more aggressive on the back end. So it's like they get to know me slowly, and then it's 18, 19, 20, 21. So by 21, they're like, oh my God, this person's not going to go away unless I talk back to them. So this is just the rough structure of what I do in every single one of those scenarios that I just mentioned. I have a couple of different videos. I might send them out after the session of what these emails actually consist of. But I would think of them in terms of pods, of like you exponentially want to get more aggressive on the back end. One last thing, and then I'll close out. You're going to think I'm a psychopath. I block my reps from reaching out unless they've personalized. We're hiring, by the way. So if you want to require quality, over-request it, then there is a way within your engagement platform that unless they fill in some of these, they're coming in off the bat, you want to make sure they know who you are, then you can do that. So in summary, I know that personalization is tough. I know that this role is tough. I know that being an SDR is a grind. I know that sometimes sales feels like selling your soul. Feels like you have to be pushy, aggressive, etc. But I think we have a really interesting opportunity here. We have an opportunity to change the game, frankly, to be who we are, lead with character, know who our buyer is, sell with integrity, bring integrity back to sales. And I think all of that is predicated on personalization. Thanks everyone so much for coming. It's very, very rare that I get to introduce someone that I have so much respect for. There are a lot of people that challenge me in my life. I would say this next person has challenged me professionally, personally, and been a major advocate for me. So it is with my great pleasure to introduce to you the wonderful one and only Josh Braun.
Hey, everybody.